further ado, we'll begin our session for today. We have Madam Geetha Gopi N, who is the Director of Profession and Programs at the Sashakti Trust, Cochin. Ma'am has over 30 years of experience in helping children with special needs. Ma'am has worked in an international school following an American curriculum for inclusive settings for more than 15 years. Ma'am has done intensive work in curriculum development and adaptations, behavioral management, coordinating and promoting best educational practicing using the UDL principles among staff and parents. Not only that, ma'am has launched Early Academic Series, which is a teacher's kit for teaching early English language skills that is based on universal design of learning. It's a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. I would like to inform you all that the session is for 2 hours, 1 hour of acknowledge sharing by ma'am, and post that we'll have your queries answered. After 10 minutes, the chat settings would be switched to the hosts and panelists. Wishing you all a very happy learning. Over to you, Geetha ma'am.
I think I have a problem. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to the Ability platform. And today we are going to have a workshop, which is a continuation from the previous workshops in this series. So let's, without much ado, I think I'll get started. Is the screen okay?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay.
You could go.
Okay, so today's topic is on building comprehension skills in children with special needs. We had looked at, in our previous workshops, we had looked at how to teach decoding skills. So we had looked at reading skills, especially the decoding part of it, how reading skills help children gain knowledge. They provide recreation, that is relaxation and enjoyment, and is a crucial part of academic success or performance in the school settings. And we also looked at how training in phonological awareness, sight word recognition, and a combination of these are necessary to teach reading fluency and spelling skills, especially using the key skill repertoires that are involved in blending, segmenting, as well as mapping. We also looked at how reading fluency, vocabulary development, and better spelling skills, even with more difficult and longer words, can be achieved through different strategies known as word attack skills. And last but not the least, we had summed up the sessions with how systematic instruction in reading and spelling skills will promote better comprehension, and which in turn has a positive impact on expressive writing or creative written expression skills. Today we are going to look at comprehension, which is by far possibly the most difficult and arguably the most important skill to teach, and why we need to teach comprehension skills targetedly to children with special needs, the different kinds or levels of comprehension that has to be imparted, what are the common challenges that children with special needs face with regards to reading comprehension, and then, of course, the strategies, techniques, activities which help us to impart reading comprehension instruction in a more effective manner. So let us understand what comprehension skills mean. Comprehension is the process of making sense of the pictures, the words, the sentences, etc., that are presented in a text or printed form. So it is trying to understand or interpret what is being provided in the reading passage or the material or text. And it comes from an interaction between whatever the child is reading in the text, whatever is there given in the printed text, and how it stimulates or triggers knowledge which is not in the text, but knowledge that has been gained by the child through earlier experiences, either through reading or through other life experiences. So comprehension actually happens as a thought process which links decoding with whatever earlier or accumulated knowledge the child has had on a particular topic. So to be able to correctly and accurately understand text, to be able to comprehend properly, so there are certain prerequisite skills that need to be in place. So, or has to happen for comprehension to take place. First is, of course, the child has to be able to decode the text or the reading material. That is, they have to be able to read the words using word attack skills or blending, segmenting, sight word recognition, whatever it is. So basically, being able to read the text is important, and then make connections between what they have read in the present given text and what they already know about that topic from their earlier background knowledge or from their earlier reading or from their earlier life experience. So trying to connect the two, that is, connect what they're reading at present with their past experiences. And then to think deeply about what they have read. So after making those connections, and then to gain a deeper understanding about the topic at hand. So it is comprehension doesn't happen as just one layer. There are different layers that come as you gain more experience and more knowledge regarding the topic through reading and through other life experiences. So why is it important to teach comprehension skills? Comprehension skills help children understand what they're reading. That's a basic thing. So there's no purpose in reading if you're just mouthing the words or you're just saying it aloud, but you're not processing what the information, the word or the text carries. So it is important that comprehension skills are what makes the reading material understandable or meaningful. So that is why it is important to teach how to comprehend. Children become more active readers and become more actively engaged with the reading material or text if they are taught the right kind of comprehension skills. So if somebody doesn't understand, it's like, if you've been introduced to a completely new language and you know how to read it, maybe phonetically or the script is the same, but you still can't make head or tail of what you've been reading. So, then you don't become active readers. You're not engaging with the text. You're just simply sounding it, just reading it. We'll say blind reading, just reading it blindly without understanding what is happening. And that means you're not engaging actively with the text, which means that you're not processing that information or you're not taking in what the information is. Neither are those connections between your previous knowledge and the present reading material happening. So teaching comprehension skills is very important because it helps children to become more actively engaged with the reading material. It makes them become more competent and more enthusiastic readers. When learning material becomes meaningful, that's when, children or person, anybody at all becomes more motivated to learn. So to become more, to make learning more enjoyable, to make reading more enjoyable, a good amount of comprehension skills have to be in place as well. And they're very interdependent. Being able to read and being able to comprehend, both are interdependent on each other. And comprehension skills, it just doesn't, it kind of triggers and stimulates a lot of the cognitive processes that helps children to understand what they're reading, what their life experiences they've gained, to make sense of the world around them. So it makes them more and more knowledgeable and better understand things around them. And last but not the least, being able to comprehend is very important because reading is a very important medium through which learning takes place. And if there is no comprehension along with reading, then it can definitely hamper academic success. So comprehending what they're reading is extremely important for good academic performance in the school setting. If you look at research findings too, most of the research findings actually point towards when children learn how to comprehend, it involves a lot of different kinds of skills, such as finding meaning in the text, being able to retell something, being able to summarize, or if they've read a large text matter, they can kind of concise it, condense it, and summarize the important parts of the passage, or give you the gist of what they've read. And then they can also apply what they've read. If they've read something and understood that, in other situations when it is necessary, they can apply these kind of skills. And it works across subjects. So when you teach comprehension skills, it is not comprehending just in a particular language. This comprehension can be applied across subject areas such as science or social studies, environmental studies, and so on. Successful reading comprehension also requires that the children have to be able to decode. They should have adequate vocabulary, and then they should have a fair amount of reading fluency. Reading fluency refers to being able to read accurately, precisely, with a fair amount of speed, which is commensurate with their age and grade level. Children who have challenges in comprehension skills usually struggle to make sense of the text. So basically, they may read, they may mouth the words, but they may not understand what is mentioned in the text. So therefore, not a whole lot of learning takes place. So children who have comprehension challenges, therefore, have to be taught these kind of things targetedly. And comprehension skills are also important to becoming more and more fluent in the language. So being able to read, being able to understand, being able to express themselves fluently in a particular language happens because comprehension takes place. So for an overall academic success, for a holistic development, especially in the academic area, comprehension skills are very crucial. There's also considerable amount of link that has been seen between the brain and comprehension skills, primarily because the brain is involved with a lot of processing that goes hand in hand with reading and comprehension. The temporal lobe, which is in the front of the brain, is usually responsible for development of phonological awareness, being able to auditorily discriminate between different kinds of sounds, etc. So a good part of the reading part of the skills, the reading fluency, vocabulary development, all these may happen through the temporal lobe. The frontal lobe, which is towards the front of the brain, are usually responsible for speech production. So being able to pronounce words correctly, being able to read with a certain amount of speed and accuracy. So the fluency in reading, being able to use words correctly in the correct word order, have use the correct amount of correct tenses, grammar, etc., while doing sentence construction. And of course, all this adds up to finally the comprehension. And then there are different parts of the brain which are called the angular and supramarginal gyrus, and these act as conductors. So basically, it is the connections between the it takes in different kinds of neuronal processes, neuronal synapses, neuronal information sending and put it all together more holistically to execute the function of reading. So we know that a lot of the cognitive processes that are involved in reading and comprehension are stimulated when we do activities that relate to these kind of comprehension skills. So since we've talked a little bit about what are the different kinds of reading skills, I'd just like everybody to just, sit up and tell me what are the different reading skills that promote development of comprehension skills. I would like the participants to come forth with the answers.
They say annotations, blending of sounds, reading, finding the main idea, sequencing events in a story, sight words, fluency skills, scanning and skimming, picture comprehension, making inference, phonetic storybooks, reading books, noting details, retelling, summarizing, decoding, making connections with the text, reading stories to the child, picture comprehension, read aloud strategies, PECs, reading cards, exposure to vocabulary, chunking, text to life connection, rhythmic poems, questions.
Yeah. Okay, so that has been a very exhaustive list. In fact, most of the participants have gone into the comprehension area also. But just to reiterate and recap on whatever they've said, what are the things that are necessary for comprehension? The reading, what does comprehension depend upon? So it is contingent upon word decoding and reading fluency, like many of you said. Background knowledge. Now, this is very important. Background knowledge is the previous or the prior knowledge of what is being read. For example, if the child is reading a passage about, say, planets, okay, the child should have some idea, some background knowledge regarding either planets or the skies or the space, and some idea about, that area. So that is the background knowledge. So whatever background knowledge they have in relation to the text that they're going to read, that is very crucial for comprehension to springboard. And then vocabulary. Vocabulary are the key words that relate to the particular subject or the particular passage that they are reading. If they're reading a story, it might just be certain word power that is being constantly used through the story. If it is, say, like a science passage, like I talked about, say, planets, then the names of the planets or the word planet, orbit, any of those scientific vocabulary that relate to planets are important. So any type of whenever comprehension is, reading comprehension activities are going on, vocabulary is a key part. Being able to understand certain specific words that relate to the text enhances comprehension. And then there is sentence construction and cohesion. Sentence construction means how do you put together the words to make a sentence. If the children are able to put together words correctly to make a sentence orally, then that also promotes better comprehension, because when they're reading, it makes better sense. If children have trouble with sentence construction, they don't know how to put the correct words in order to make sentences, then obviously that also interferes with their comprehension. Cohesion is, being able to connect one sentence to the other, especially when you're reading a story or when you're reading a passage or a paragraph. The first sentence, whatever is stated in the first sentence, will connect to something to the second sentence and to the third, and that is what brings about a certain thread or a certain continuity in the passage, and that is called cohesion. So being able to connect these sentences and not see them as just individual sentences independent of each other. So being able to read the sentences correctly, understand them, and connect one to the other is important for promoting comprehension. And then the key thing, processing information while reading. So processing information means all the cognitive processes that takes place while reading is happening. That is attention. They need to pay attention. Working memory. Working memory is something that is, when children are reading, while they're reading, to keep in mind whatever they have read, all the important points of whatever they have been reading, and then reasoning out. So, if they've read something, being able to analyze it, being able to critically evaluate it, being able to come up with their own opinion. If some questioning is done, being able to think about it and give answer. So, to be able to reason out. So all these cognitive processes usually happens simultaneously while we are reading. And if it doesn't happen, that is when, comprehension is really gets affected. And with some of our children, these all these processes may not synchronize and happen together at the same time. To look at different kinds of comprehension, what are the different levels or the kinds of comprehension that we talk about? Most of us are very familiar with direct comprehension. Direct comprehension refers to being able to read and understand what is just stated in the particular passage or the sentence or the text given, which we say reading on the line. In a layman's term, we call it reading on the line. That is, for example, if I say Sam is a cat, he can run very fast. So, it is very clearly stated in the text. If you ask who is Sam, yes, Sam is a cat. And if you, what can he do? He can run. And how can he run? He can run very fast. So all the information that you need to derive is directly stated in the text. Now, when we come to the second level, which is a slightly more difficult level of comprehension, which is called inferential comprehension, that means that the actual, the exact information you're looking for is not directly stated in the text, but you can read the text and you have to try and understand the underlying meaning that is there, which we commonly in layman's terms we call reading between the lines. So the real meaning is not there given as a straight sentence in the text, but by reading the passage or by reading the sentences, you have to be able to kind of derive that meaning by reading whatever is given in the text. So to understand, to arrive at a deeper meaning. And inferential comprehension, for example, if I use the same example that I gave you, Sam is a big cat, he can run very fast. So the question you could ask would be, can Sam run very slow? Okay, now, can Sam run very slow is not given in the passage. It is not directly mentioned in any of the sentences in this passage. But from the reading, Sam can run very fast. That gives us a clue that, yes, he cannot run slow. He runs very fast. So again, here you see how from the simple two sentences itself, you can infer a different kind of meaning if you trigger those kind of questions. And then the third kind, which is adding another layer to the comprehension, is called evaluative comprehension. Evaluative comprehension is you have read what is in the text, you have understood the deeper meaning, and then you form your own opinions based on what you have read. So, it says, again, let's take the same example. Sam is a fat cat. He runs very fast. Now, you can ask a question, for example, do you think Sam can also run very slow? Now, here it is again not stated in the text, but maybe you can give your opinion there. You can, okay, he runs very fast, but they've asked you, can Sam run also slow also? Not just fast, but also slow. So you can give your opinion. And quite often in evaluative comprehension, there are no real right or wrong answers. It is what you feel, what your opinion is, and how you substantiate what your opinion is. So again, a lot of these are different layers of comprehension, and we need to work on all these kinds of comprehension when we work with children. There's also a much higher level of reading comprehension, especially when you come to, big chunks of matter, long passages, long stories, or when you're dealing with, content-based reading, such as, reading a lesson in science or social studies and so on. Especially in middle school, high, or even upper primary. When there is large chunks of reading, huge, lot of reading, which you have to undergo, and then you have to take down to comprehend that matter, then we use something called the SQ4R strategy. S stands for survey. Survey means you kind of skim. Somebody already mentioned the word skim. You kind of skim through the chapter. You go through the skeleton of the chapter. You look at what is the main heading, what are the subheadings, if there are any pictures and illustrations, diagrams, what are those showing, if there are key vocabulary words which are highlighted or which are mentioned at the beginning of the lesson. those. So basically, you're getting a basic skeleton or outline of what the chapter is or the lesson is. The second is question. That is, what you do is to be able to, this is a strategy we use for comprehending large matter. So what you do is you turn the titles into questions. So for example, if the child is reading about planets, so you can say it talks about the title of the lesson is planets. So you can just add a question, what are planets? And maybe you go into the headings, stars, planets, satellites, whatever. So then again, add what are these or give examples for these. Then you can go into the subheadings, that is the names of the different planets. So, you can mention what is Venus or what is Mercury, what's the Earth. So turning these headings or subheadings into questions so that when you're reading the chapter, you're trying to find answers to those questions. So it helps you as a guide. It helps you to narrow your focus onto what is important while you're reading. Then, of course, you read it. And when you're reading the chapter, you're trying to answer the questions that you've put forth for the headings and subheadings. And if the matter is getting too difficult, then you can slow down and reread a portion if you haven't got it. And then recite. Recite is basically after you've read a small portion to retell it loudly or to note down in point form. You can jot down the important points you've read. Either you can say it or you can jot it. So this is a kind of a just to make sure you're working on your working memory is intact, that you're able to store the information that you have been reading as you've gone along. And then relate. Relate is being able to connect whatever you've been reading to whatever you knew about this topic previously. So probably you knew planets, stars, all these were part of space. You knew about the moon and the sun. So now you're going a step further and learning about other bodies in space other than the sun and moon, which you can directly see. So being able to connect that kind of information. Also, if you've seen any videos or movies, or if you've been on a field trip, maybe you've been to a planetarium where you've seen a program, an audiovisual program on planets. So being able to connect those experiences to what you're reading. So that is relating or making connections. And then, of course, at the end, you read, review it. Review means you skim over the reading material again. So basically, you go through these SQ4R strategies, especially when you're reading large matters of text. So when we've talked about, what are the different kinds of comprehension, what are the different kinds of skills that are necessary for comprehension. So what are the, specific challenges that you think children with special needs would have when it comes to the area of comprehension? I would like the participants to come forth with ideas, please.
They've stated sounding out the words can get difficult, working memory, reading speed, making connections, understanding attention span, problem sustaining attention, understanding what they read, difficulty making connections, spelling, difficulty in deductions, poor vocabulary, difficulty in relating words, understanding the text gets difficult, easily distracted, difficulty connections, difficulty in pronunciations.
Yes, pretty much, whatever we've been speaking about now, whatever are the skills that are necessary for promoting comprehension, many of those skills or some of those skills may be deficient or impaired in children who have special needs. So basically, children with special needs may display poor word decoding and reading fluency. They may have weak vocabulary, poor background knowledge of whatever subjects that they're reading about, processing difficulties, which involves working memory, reasoning, and attention, and poor sentence construction or cohesion, being able to connect the different sentences in a given story or a passage. So all these things, basically what all you put together, yes, all these things do impair comprehension skills in children with special needs. So therefore, when we are targeting instruction, we definitely have to work on all these skills. So what are the different strategies broadly to help build comprehension? We need to work on certain key comprehension skills. So certain key comprehension skills have to be directly targeted and worked upon. We've already talked about decoding skills in the previous workshop. So that goes without saying that, all the decoding skills and the reading fluency has to be worked on. But over and above that, some of the key comprehension skills that need to be taught are being questioning and responding to questions. So being able to, if somebody asks them a question based on their reading material, to be able to answer it, be able to respond to it, either orally or through writing or through picking up and identifying whatever. And also to be able to ask questions also. That is an equally important skill, which a lot of times we tend to ask questions and expect them to answer. But it is also important they learn how to frame questions, because that is a very important way of learning about comprehension, learning about what to find out. And one of the ways, like I told you about in the SQ4R strategy, convert the headings into questions. Or, if you're talking about something, get the children to ask questions about that topic. So being able to frame questions is also equally important, and that has to be encouraged as well. Summarizing. Summarizing is, if you've read a story, being able to retell the story by, condensing and saying the most important parts, finding out the main idea, the main idea and the details that support that main idea, important facts or pieces of information in a given passage. If there is a problem, solution, or a cause effect kind of thing in the story or the reading material, to find out what is the problem and what was the solution. And this can be done through a lot of stories, lot of non-fiction, passages and so on. Character study, that is, if you've read a story, understanding a particular character and how they function, and being able to, describe them, describe their traits, their personality traits, their looks, physical appearances, the things they did, the impact that the character had on the story, and so on. So a wide array of skills comes under summarizing. Sequencing, or being able to understand a timeline or a logical sequence of events that take place. And again, this can relate to either a fiction story, or it can be a non-fiction piece, anything that leads from one to the other. So having a timeline of events and being able to recollect the timeline in the sequence that it has been provided in the text. Being able to draw conclusions and infer it. So after having read it, trying to come to their own conclusions, whether the story ended properly, whether what the characters did was right or wrong, or if certain things have not been mentioned in the passage, but to be able to infer information and say, okay, this might have happened because this is why the character behaved in such a way. So being able to go beyond what is stated in the text and infer information. Comparing and contrasting. Comparing and contrasting is again a very important skill. It can be used again in fiction as well as non-fiction. When you compare and contrast, you can either take two characters in a story and compare and contrast, what are the similarities between them or what are the differences between them. You can take two completely different stories and compare and contrast them. You can also compare and contrast, historical figures. For example, you can compare and contrast two kings and their achievements, and compare and contrast, see what was similar between the two, what was different. Similarly, even with any of the scientific concepts that you teach, you're teaching about, say, mammals and reptiles, and compare and contrast mammals and reptiles and see what is similar about them, what is different. So being able to compare and contrast adds a different kind of inferential comprehension to the layer, to the children's understanding of the text. Distinguishing between fact and opinion. Again, being able to read a particular passage or particular text and I understand what are true facts and what are just opinions of the characters or opinions of the narrator or the story writer or the author. So being able to do a wide array of these kind of skills adds to different layers of comprehension. And many of these skills have to be targetedly taught. So to build, comprehension skills and all these other skills that I've been talking about just in the previous slide, it is as usual, we have to incorporate multisensory, multimodality learning activities, which target these kind of skills. And in addition to that, because, as we move through schooling, a lot of paperwork is involved. So appropriate skill-based worksheets. So when you're teaching different kinds of comprehension skills, have worksheets that are customized to or target the teaching of those kind of comprehension skills. So what are the different kinds of activities? To think of multisensory, multimodality activities that we can do, which will promote these kind of comprehension skills. And remember the comprehension skills that I've just talked about, the summarizing, identifying the main idea, understanding timeline of events, compare and contrast, being able to predict, infer information, understanding fact and opinion, and all these kind of wide array of comprehension skills. So can you think of, certain kinds of activities that you may have done or that could promote, better comprehension skills in children? And think of multi-learning, multimodality activities. So participants, please come forth with your suggestions.
They have told flashcards, show and tell, asking WH questions, sequencing activity, picture cards, memory activity, picture comprehension, dancing with rhythm and rhymes, drawing, sequencing activity, music, word decoding, flashcard, cause and effect, showing pictures, animated movies using Venn diagrams, sensory play, PECs, read aloud, drama, interactive storytelling, cause and effect, modeling and play, graphic organizers, dramatization, role play, barrier games, puzzles, mind map, flowcharts, interactions, video games, pros and cons, word web, poetry, kinesthetic learning strategies, free play, concept map, picture comprehension, emotional song and dance, socialization activities, draw their understanding, play, flowcharts for scientific mechanism, crossword games, word building games,
Okay,
brainstorming on titles. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's been a very, very exhaustive list, and it already shows that the participants really know a lot of these things. So they have been working on these strategies. It's nice. So let's go. Multisensory activities. Yes. So what are some of the sample activities we can do? Use picture books. You can use pop-up books or sensory books, which make it easier for children to understand or comprehend the story. So, you can draw a lot of attention to these visual pictures or the pop-up arts and so on. And that, helps bring the story alive rather than just focusing on print. So yes, these kind of things do provide a good learning. Exposure to audio, text, and stories, so audio-visual stories. Nowadays, many of these are available online. So they can go through that, or you can even have, audio recordings of text. So you get, readers on tape, so they can just listen to the reader while they browse through the story. So again, these kind of activities help, especially for the auditory learners, the auditory visual learners. Using puppets, and puppets can be very, they can be hand puppets. You can use little stick puppets for denoting the different places or characters in the story. You can have finger puppets, which you can animate. So using these kind of story sticks, puppets, etc., again helps bring a story alive in the classroom. Using again drawings, many of you have mentioned that, which I have widely used in my classrooms, getting children to draw different parts of the story and writing the sentences that go with it and putting those two, all those together. Again, if you look at the left-hand side, the children have done the drawings and the writing themselves, and it has been put in a sequential order to build up or retell the story. Very visual, very, active student engagement involved. And this helps for a good recap and review of the material learned as well. So that is one. They can also do a lot of art and craft or real life activities where, you can actually draw a particular character or draw a particular sequence, your favorite part of the story, etc. Again, drawing or doing art and craft activities, making these kind of models. Puppets can also be made by the children themselves, and they can use that to retell the story. So all these kind of activities do help. Engaging in role play, to dramatize. Somebody said drama already. So to be able to dramatize and do role play. And for role playing, again, you don't need any extensive costumes or anything. You can just have little labels of the character you're playing, and you can just, say your lines and, enact the story. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, you see, these children are performing, doing a little role play on the different planets in the solar system. So each one has a planet, and each one has to talk about the planet they are. So again, these kind of things help. Real life experiences, for example, if you're teaching about plants, getting children actively involved in gardening, all the different processes of gardening, like planting the seeds, harvesting the fruit, taking care of the plants by, weeding, watering, etc. So all the different life experiences also provide multisensorial input, which enables better comprehension. So when they read about these kind of things, it is easier for them to connect because they've already experienced these kind of the same information in other formats. And then coming to the worksheet part of it, the paper and pencil kind of comprehension, which is a bit more difficult. Because a lot of children, they may perform well in the multisensory activities, but when it comes to putting it down in paper, that's when they have more difficulties. So one of the first strategies we use is basic questioning. So being able to read questions and being able to answer that. Initially, we can start off with very simple, direct questions, and the answers can be either multiple choice or in the form of a fill in the blank. And then slowly you can introduce, complete sentence kind of answers. What questioning helps to do is it helps to develop critical thinking skills. It helps to, help them to check whether their work is complete. Because once they've gone through all the questions, it means they've read the passage thoroughly, and they have been able to understand everything that is there in the passage. It increases the motivation or interest. It enables them, it triggers their thinking process basically, and get them more actively involved. And it also helps the teachers to assess, how well the children have understood the reading passage or thing. And so it is, questions can also be used before you start teaching the comprehension, so that you can, trigger the background knowledge and see how much they already know, how much prior knowledge they have regarding that particular story or topic. Now, if you look at this worksheet that is given here, it is a very short story. And after reading the story, they've given certain questions. First question is a multiple choice, which is a direct question. The second one is also a fill in the blank, direct question again. But if you come to the third part, the third question, do you like to have a pet? Now, this is this is not a direct question, because it is not stated anywhere in that passage that is given. Here they have to come up with their own. It is more like an evaluative comprehension. So you're adding a different layer of comprehension. You're forcing them to think about, whether they would like to have a pet or not. And then it also asks, do you have a pet? So if they do have a pet, again, you can extend upon these questions as well. If they, if it's a very small child, you can say, do you like to have a pet? It can be a simple, straightforward yes or no answer. Do you have a pet? Again, can be yes or no answer. And but if they're slightly older children, you can expand these sentences into, do you like to have a pet? Give me your reason. If yes, why? If why or why not? So being able to expand upon why they would like to have a pet or why they would not like to have a pet. Similarly, do you have a pet? Again, why or why not? Why is it that you don't have a pet? Or why do you have a pet? Again, depending upon the age, the level of the children, you can expand upon these kind of questions. And a lot of times, again, this is an indication about how such a simple story itself, you can work on different direct comprehension, as well as you can work on other kinds of, the more inferential and evaluative comprehension. You don't have to wait to work on inferential and evaluative comprehension until you get to bigger, big text matter or larger amounts of text matter. Even with very small 1-2 sentence stories, you can still work on, the direct, not only the direct comprehension, but also the inferential as well as the evaluative. In my earlier example, just with the 2-sentence story, I had mentioned that. So it is very important to do these different levels of comprehension as much as you can right from the beginning. And initially it can be just oral answers, but then eventually, you can translate it into written comprehension as well. Again, another sample activities where the stories are getting a bit more bigger, and you have a lot of the WH questions like what, who, where, why, and so on. And normally the who and the what questions are the most simpler ones. So when we start with comprehension, initially we start with these questions, then slowly we introduce where, and then when, why, and how. So when, why, and how are the more difficult ones because they're not as tangible. Whereas who and what are more concrete in the way the answers come about. So you can, the answers are more directly there in the text. Whereas when it comes to why, how, etc., you have to, think a little bit more deeply about the text and understanding what these words mean. I mean, who would refer to say a person or a particular character? What can refer to a particular character or an inanimate object? Where refers to, you're talking about a place. When refers to a time or to the season or whatever. Why refers to the cause, the reason behind something. How refers to the process, how something was done or something happened. So being able to understand those question words and translating it into answers is important, and therefore you need to give different graded level according to the level of the child, the text, the difficulty of the text, the difficulty levels of the questions can vary as per the child's level. And you can work targetedly on the WH words, the question words, basically when, who, what, where, when, how, and why. And then we come to the next part, the next comprehension skill, which is summarizing. So being able to condense the story and put it into parts. Again, story map is a very good graphic organizer that helps in this. Here you see how a story map has been divided. The title of the story, what genre the story belongs to, who is the author, the main characters, the setting. Setting means the place or the time through which the story is happening, and then the plot of the story, the beginning, middle, and end. So initially, when we do a story map, especially in the younger grades, grade 1, for example, the one on the right-hand side works well because the events of the story have been picturized. So it is, again, retelling or summarizing, but through pictures. And as the children grow, their reading levels get better, you can kind of put sentences below those plot for the beginning, middle, and end as well. Certain story maps may not have a proper beginning, middle, and end. It may have a problem or a solution. For example, if you look at some of the young stories, like say the thirsty crow. The crow was very thirsty, and that was the problem. It needed to drink some water, but the water was situated at the bottom of the pot. So that was the problem. So how did the crow find a solution to that problem? So again, some stories may have a problem solution. So you can use an appropriate story map graphic organizer accordingly. So different kinds of story map can be used. You can also organize a graphic organizer such as, who is in the story. So who is the main character? That is someone. Wanted. It is like, what do the characters want in the story? But then they have a problem. So what does the character try to do? And then how does the character find a solution to that problem, resolve the problem? So you mention these in points, then you all put it all down together and make up the summary or the retelling of the story. Just another example of how a different kind of graphic organizer can be used. Similarly, you can also do character study kind of graphic organizers. You can talk about the appearance of the character. How does the character look like? Name the character first, the appearance. What are the specific traits of the personality traits? Are they nice people? How do they feel? How do they react in different situations? And the text evidence. The text evidence means the sentences or the key words which explain the appearance of the, which support what you have derived about the appearance or the personality of the character. And then the same thing, what does the character do in the story, the different actions that the character does, and what is the evidence, what are the sentences or the key words in the text that connect, that tell you that this is what the character was doing. So again, being able to connect the text evidence or the printed matter to different aspects of the character. So making those connections is important, and these kind of graphic organizers help children to make those connections. So a lot of practice with these kind of graphic organizers are necessary for that. Again, same thing, again, the left-hand side, it's a very small thing about, how you can do a character study, what the character says, thinks, feels, does, in short, you can mention these and then you can summarize them. Main idea and details. Suppose, especially this works very well for non-fiction passages. Suppose you're reading a passage about animals, what is the main idea? And then what are the different kinds of details that are present there? And then you can put all those together and make up a condensed version of a summarized version of the passage that you've read. Summarizing, again, this is called concept mapping. When there are large topics with a lot of information, using a web. Some of you had already mentioned about how to use webs. So use webs or use flow charts to put in large chunks of information onto more condensed, digestible, easily assimilated way. And this also helps promote better working memory. It is very visual. It helps the children to grasp things in a nutshell, to put a large amount of matter in a nutshell. And these also help as a good study skill later on. Later on, when you want to review, you don't need to read through the whole passage or the whole lesson. Maps like these, mind maps like these, or graphic organizers like these help you to condense it. Sequencing, again, you can have a story or you can have a particular event happening. These can be provided in the form of pictures, and then the child has to read the sentences and number it and make up the story. Sometimes you can also give sentence strips, ask the children to read the sentence strips, put them in order, and they themselves can illustrate. They themselves can draw what is happening and put them in a timeline of events. Again, this works very well, especially when you're trying to summarize or retell the events in a story, or if you're trying to do a timeline of actual events that happened, historical events that happened, or possibly you're trying to talk about the COVID situation. So what happened in the early part of the year, the middle part of the year, the later part of the year. So anywhere where there's a sequence involved, you can bring about sequencing activities. There are also plenty of the, especially with a lot of the children's stories, children's literature, Many of the story pictures, words, sentence strips, etc. are available on the net, which you can actually download and print and use as sequencing activities. Or you can get the children to make their own self-made books where they themselves can illustrate and retell their stories. Sequencing can also involve the actual sequencing words, like first what happened, then what happened, later what happened, and then lastly what happened. So using these kind of words also help them to use a timeline and sequence. And all these things, these are all just different examples of how you can visually give different kinds of ways for them to organize their information, to recollect, to retain, and to review. Sequencing can also happen when it comes to, say, science kind of activities, say life cycle, for example. You can have the pictures, then either ask them to draw or cut and paste pictures and then write sentences to go with it. Here you see a ladder kind of sequential activity where different years are given about the history of technology. So, a template can be, a clear template can be given, and different years or different event markers can be given where they have to write about each event marker. So again, these can be used with different kinds of topics depending upon the topic that you're teaching. You can use different kinds of graphic organizers that help with sequencing. Compare and contrast. Some of the best things that can be used is a Venn diagram, where the 2 or 3 things, if you're comparing two different concepts. For example, here in they've given mammals and reptiles. And in mammals and reptiles, the middle part where both the circles are meeting, the similarities between mammals and reptiles can be given. What is similar about both? And then on the individual sides, each of their unique characteristics can be mentioned. And again, when you're doing this, for example, the first point says warm-blooded in mammals. So immediately go to the reptiles and say whether it is warm or cold-blooded. What is the difference? The same way, the body covering of mammals, body covering of reptiles. How they reproduce in mammals, how they reproduce in reptiles. So doing it side by side helps add a much more deeper inferential level of understanding. And it is always good to compare and contrast. And you can not only compare and contrast non-fiction items like scientific concepts, etc. As I said earlier, you can compare to characters, you can compare to stories, you can even compare two friends, use your real life examples, or if they've done planted 2 different kinds of plants, how they differ, and so on. So all that adds to the comprehension level. Again, different kinds of sample activities where you do get these kind of, you can straight away print off these kind of empty templates, either in the circular form or in the rectangular form from the net, and use these, or even get kids to draw some of these. If it's a circle and this thing, I usually even get them to draw these kind of things. You can also do compare and contrast using a matrix. Matrix is where the different indicators that you're going to compare then contrast them on are given in a table form. So here you find an example where 2 characters, John and Peter, are being compared. And the different qualities in John and Peter are already mentioned, like the age, the physical looks, their musical ability, or any other characters. So you can keep adding. So in a matrix, what happens is all the indicator clues are given, and based on that, each of them you can compare and contrast. So, for compare and contrast, some of the most popularly used graphics are either a matrix or a Venn diagram. Another example, how they have differentiated between soccer or football and hockey, and how different indicators like the equipment used for soccer and hockey, the clothing that is worn, what it is played on, what turf it is played on, etc., is given, and they're doing a compare and contrast. Then we come to inferential comprehension. Inferential compare and contrast is also a part of inferential comprehension, because it's not just direct. From what is directly there, you're trying to infer a different layer. So compare and contrast also overlaps with inferential comprehension. And here it is being able to understand the underlying meaning, what is not directly stated in the text, but you've learned some amount of information and then you're trying to derive some meaning out. And what do we do? The key things to understand are when we do literal or directing comprehension, you exactly find the answer, you jot it down or you write it down. Whereas when it comes to inferential comprehension, exact words are not there, but you look for clues. So, and then you gather the evidence from the text. Those clues give you some evidence, and then from there you infer or you put down your findings. So these are the skills that you have to look for. And when you're teaching them, if the children are not getting it, you have to provide those kind of clues or cue them on with those kinds of clues. And in inferential comprehension also, there are some activities. You can find different grade level inferential comprehension passages where, direct questions are very minimal and they have to read and find out. If you look at the right-hand side, again, this is a very simple form of inferential comprehension where the questions are very simple, but the answers are not directly stated in the passage. But what they have done is, for example, if you look at the first question, the girls buy, and 3 pictures are given. And if you look at the passage, it doesn't say what the girls have bought. It just says they buy a snack. And they've here in the answer options, they've given finger fries, they've given balloons, and they've given a dress. So these children have to derive that it might have been finger fries because the sentence says they buy a snack. And color coding that, we've color coded it. So when we color code it, it gives them indication, okay, this is the sentence from where they have to infer that information. Similarly, the movie is, sad, funny, scary. Now, this story is about Jill and Beth going for a movie. So again, it says they smile and laugh. So what indication does that give? So trying, this is making the children more aware of what they are reading, gather that evidence, take those clues and relate it to, was the movie sad, was it funny, or was it scary? So, again, this is another example of inferential comprehension. And then what will Jill step on? Now, again, it doesn't say what she stepped on. It says it was a pink thing, it was sticky, and it would not come off, and it was yuck. So again, getting them to think of what do you think it could be? What could be pink and sticking onto your shoes and be very yucky? So, think on those lines. So again, here the color coding really helps where they have to go and reread to infer the information. Then they can draw a picture to demonstrate what they've understood. So again, different levels of, how you can make inferences. And as I said, it doesn't have to be a big passage or a difficult passage. Even with 1-line, 2-line stories, you can work on at least oral inferential comprehension so that when they come to this level, they can do some amount of written inferential comprehension. So start with the oral and then move on to written part of comprehension. And then relating the background information. We can use something called a KWL chart. K stands for what they already know about the topic prior to reading. And then what are they going to find out? What are they going to learn in that particular lesson? So here we have an example of the seasons. What they already know is they know there are 4 seasons, summer, winter, spring, and fall. And then what they're going to learn is why do we have 4 seasons in a year? How long does each season last? Do we all have the same season regardless of where we are living, in which part of the world we are living? And then after they finish, they can do the L, the third part of that graphic organizer, which is L, what I learned. So we have, then they can jot down, they can recollect all that they've learned and write down, okay, we have seasons because, the earth rotates and revolves around its axis. It revolves around the sun. Most seasons last roughly about 3 to 4 months. Northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere of the earth has different kinds of seasons depending on where they are, how far away they are from the sun, and so on. So again, using a KWL helps. KWL can be used again for anything at all. You can use it even before the beginning of a non-fiction story or a fiction story. I have seen teachers who effectively use KWL for every lesson they teach, because it is a good way of getting started, triggering the background knowledge, and then connecting it to what you're learning. And then after you finish learning, connecting all the three, like what you knew before, what you learned from learning the chapter or the lesson, and then what you have finally retained. So a KWL chart really helps. This is just another example where, the child is talking about dinosaurs and, what I know, what I want to know, and then after reading the lesson, what I have learned. Sometimes, especially in the higher classes, you may also go to KWHL. An H component is added. K is again what I already know, which is the background information. W is what I want to know. That is what I'll be learning in this lesson. How H is added on. The third part H is added on. That is how. How can I learn this? I can read a book. I can look up the internet. I can do an experiment, or I can ask somebody to help me out with this topic. So, or go watch a video about it, go watch a movie about it, and so on. So the how part of it can be done. Do a project or come up with an assignment and so on. And then at the end, of course, it's a recap on what I have learned. So again, this contributes to better comprehension, and it is also a good study skill, especially with the older kids. And even with the younger kids, you can definitely, if you have planned different activities, that can come as part of how. So for example, if you planned role play, if you planned audio games, if you planned, art and craft activities, all that can come into, so that the children know that when they're doing the art and craft activity or they're doing the role play, they're actually doing something that they have been reading in their lesson, or they are going to read in their lesson, or they're actually learning about something that is going to be the content of their lesson. So again, just another example, where again, narrowed down topic about Mars, what they already know about Mars, what they're going to learn, and then after they finish the lesson, what what all they have learned about Mars. So again, here you can, add on an H factor of, okay, how are you going to learn about it, and list out the different ways you're going to learn more information about Mars. And quite often when we do the H, we also write textbook or exercise book, and then you can add on any activity that you're doing in addition to this. Facts and opinion. Again, do appropriate worksheets that go with this. Fact is a true statement that can be proved. And some of the key words that you have to look for is, you can look for numbers, dates, data, statistics, scientific facts or historical facts, the real events that took place, non-fiction information. All this contribute to facts. So any of these kind of things that come in the passage will be a fact. Whereas an opinion will be not a real true fact. It is what somebody is feeling, say the author is feeling, or what the reader is feeling. And keywords to, which indicate that is, I prefer, I think, I feel, I believe, or, this is better than that, or this is bigger, this is the best experience I've had. So using these kind of est words, comparative words, all these are more indicative of opinion. So making children aware of these kind of key clues that tell whether it is a fact or whether it is an opinion. And you can actually have worksheets that go with it. You can, you can give passages, and then you can give sentences from the passages, and the children have to read that and find out whether it is a true fact or whether it is an opinion of somebody. So again, doing a lot of, simple activities like this. The left-hand side is a very simple one, which shows, talks about sound. So the facts are sound is a vibration, it travels through air, it moves slower, if it is low sound, and it moves faster when it is a high sound. And then opinions about sound is, I don't like the sound of thunder, or I like the sound of thunder. She sings really high in a very high voice. That's a very funny sound, or that's a very scary sound. So again, sound, but it's very opinionated. So again, being able to differentiate between fact and opinion. Do, activities that actually go through these kind of things. And you can do them in worksheets. You can also do them in different kinds of multisensorial activities. So we come to the end of comprehension. Basically, we've talked about key comprehension skills, crucial reading skills, which are important to make sense of what we have, what they've been reading. Teaching specific skills. I've talked about a big array of, the comprehension skills, such as summarizing, character study, timelines, logical sequencing of events, factored opinion, inferential comprehension, giving their own predictions, and so on. Multisensorial teaching definitely helps, because that helps bring a particular reading print matter alive, and therefore it enables more active student engagement, which definitely catches their attention. It helps them become more motivated and actively involved in the comprehension process. And in addition to that, use the graphic organizers as well, because ultimately we have to bring all these onto paper pencil as well. So using the from a 3D or from a kinesthetic tactile learning to bring it onto the print learning, we have to simultaneously use graphic organizers, which will help in the development of comprehension skills. And it goes without saying, when we teach all these things, the key vocabulary, no matter what we are teaching, whether it is fiction, non-fiction, whatever, the key vocabulary words have to be taught. And in different topics, it can be done in different ways. Sometimes you can pre-teach, especially if it is difficult words, which we don't normally use in everyday language, such as, vocabulary which relates to scientific concepts or historical or geographical concepts, math concepts, for example. So some of those key vocabulary can be taught earlier. You can introduce the key vocabulary, work on the meanings of those, give examples, and then you can enter the lesson. Whereas in some other lessons, especially if it's a story and if there are certain difficult words, but they are not that unfamiliar words. So in those cases, those are also words which we do tend to use in everyday language. If it is those kind of words, you can teach them as you go along also. But again, target those vocabulary words that you're actually planning to work on. So all these skills goes without saying. Decoding has to be there, vocabulary development has to be there, but and fluency. Along with that, carry on your comprehension activities hand in hand. And these are not two separate things. They're two sides of the same coin. You have to do it simultaneously. And as I said, if the children are not yet up to writing, start with oral comprehension. And in oral comprehension also do direct inferential as well as evaluative comprehension, even orally. Even in a show and tell activity, you can have these kind of oral comprehension going on. And when you do a lot of oral comprehension, then it translates. Once they become a bit habituated to simple writing, then you can put them into written comprehension exercises. And if there are reading difficulties, and no matter how much remediation you give, the reading is the problem that is impeding comprehension, then you may have to use other accommodations such as audio, text, or listening comprehension to help with the deficiencies that the children have. So that brings us to an end of comprehension. Although I took you through a journey of what is comprehension, it is not as easy. Comprehension has to be very, very targetedly taught. It is, as I said, it is very, very, it is probably the most important skill in today's world, especially in today's changing scenario, because you have to be able to understand what you're reading or listening to. You have to be able to form your own opinions, gather information from it, formulate your own opinions, being able to take what is necessary and apply it in your everyday life situations, and so on. So comprehension skill is the key. For many of the other things, we have technological adaptations, but for comprehension, the brain has to process it. And we as educators have to do these different kinds of activities, spend considerable amount of time on comprehension activities, so that that kind of thinking process is triggered. And these kind of comprehension skills are actually the children are trained in these kind of comprehension skills, which will enable them to become, deal with their environment in a very effective manner. So thank you. That brings us to a final end of today's workshop, and I'm opening to question and answers.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a very nice, informative, practical strategy session. I'm sure all the participants might have enjoyed. If you have enjoyed, do type yes in the chat box and fill in your feedback. The feedback link is now going to be posted in the chat box. Before we move on to the Q&A, let me take you all through a few things. As most of you wanted to have access to the slide deck, now a link will be posted in the chat box through which you can access the slide deck, the overview document, the resources, and the recording of the session at your convenience. You could view them. Please do check out the link and share it with those who ever could benefit from it. Also, I would like to tell you that if this session has been beneficial, please do help us in spread the word and spread awareness to improve the outcomes of children with special needs. You could share the certificate program with them. You could share the resources of the events, or also join us as an abilities inclusion champion. Now, do check out the links of the upcoming events in the chat box. We have a session on understanding ADHD in classrooms, at home, and other social settings on 10th of February by Ms. Shivani Vadhva. And then we have prerequisites to improve handwriting skills for children with special needs on 17th February by Dr. Neeta Mehta. All of them would be done at 4:30 p.m. India time, 6 p.m. Indonesia time, 7 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Do share the care and forward the links to those who can benefit from it. Book your slots and see you at those sessions. Now we'll move on to the Q&A. Are you ready for it, Geetha ma'am?
Yes.
We have a first question from Annalyn and others. As we have been speaking a lot about comprehension, could you throw light on the early red flag signs that could indicate that the child might face comprehension challenges?
See, in the workshop, if you followed this workshop carefully, we've talked about what are the things necessary for comprehension, right? What are the skills that are necessary? So first we said word decoding and reading fluency. We talked about vocabulary. We talked about, whether the children and the child background information about whatever you're going to read about. So if these three itself are, the child is having difficulty in, then definitely you can, that it will impact their comprehension skills. That will be the first indicator, especially the word decoding. If there is word decoding, if they're having difficulty reading itself, then they may also have difficulty in comprehension. But to differentiate that, what you can do is, like I said, suppose you read out to the child, is the child able to comprehend? So if the child is still having difficulties with comprehension, then there is a problem with the comprehension per se. But if the child is having difficulty in comprehension only when the reading part, when the child has to read as well as comprehend, then probably the problem is with the reading, or maybe comprehending while doing the reading, to carry those two processes together. So these are kind of indications. And usually we find if they have reading issues, definitely it'll affect comprehension, because if they're struggling with the reading part of it itself, when you read in a choppy or a halted manner, or a very struggling manner, obviously there's no flow in reading, and therefore what you're understanding will also be affected. Also, when they are struggling to read, so much of their focus, attention, and everything is narrowed into decoding the word, that thinking about the information simultaneously doesn't happen. So if there is a reading problem, definitely it will have an impact on the comprehension. But if the child's, if orally, if the child is able to take in things, then it is important to find out whether listening comprehension is there or not. And if it is If listening is intact, then you have to work more on reading and reading fluency, and probably rereading, so that, with time, or, those are the children you need to also provide additional support for the reading struggle. So, give audio, text, and so on, so that the reading struggle is minimized and the child can comprehend a bit more easily. The reading struggle is, minimized to an extent so that the comprehension can take place. So these kind of things can be done. All the prerequisites that I talked about for comprehension, if any of those are, even if the child has very low exposure to an outside environment, and we've seen children who come from, sometimes they come from very, very, affluent families, and they're so protected that they don't have real life experiences. They're not let out. And therefore, some of these children also, when you, or the other way around, if they come from very disadvantaged backgrounds, and when you're teaching some topic which they've had no exposure to, that again can affect their comprehension. So all these things, all the prerequisites that I talked about, if any of those things are lacking or deficient in children, in any child, not just children with special needs, even the regular children, if those things are deficient or are lacking, then definitely they'll have an impact on comprehension.
Observation is the key. It's important to look out whether the prerequisite skills have been there or not in the child. Thank you, ma'am. Now we have a question from Aida Vista, who wants to know that what is the right age to start with the building of comprehension skills? What could be the early comprehension strategies that can be used with children who are in the special needs spectrum?
Comprehension goes, it goes without saying, you started right from the word go. From the time that they learn to speak, even before they get into reading also. But since here we are talking about reading comprehension per se, yes, the moment you start teaching them alphabets, phonological awareness and so on, you start with comprehension right there. When you're talking about comprehension at that stage, especially if it's the alphabet stage, you're building on vocabulary, right? When you talk about beginning sounds, or words that begin with a certain sound, words that end with a certain sound, you're building upon vocabulary. So those are also things that lead to comprehension. So start with vocabulary building, and then oral language, speaking and listening skills. Those really form the basis a lot that contribute to comprehension. So right from the word go, from the moment children are in school, even prior to that, comprehension starts happening. But since we're talking about inclusive school settings, the moment they come in, the moment you're starting with, any kind of learning, oral, all the speaking, listening skills, all the reading, writing skills, from all that, comprehension has to be built upon. So vocabulary development has to be built upon, being able to answer questions, like even something as simple as, using the question words, like what is your name, or how old are you, or, where is your home, where do you live, so on, starts right from there. And then as you go along, as you teach more and more print material, you teach alphabets, and you teach words, you teach sentences, stories, and passages. All along, comprehension keeps expanding, as you go from the small unit of print to the higher units of print.
Actually, comprehension becomes the basis of all learning for them to understand what is requisite. Now we have a question from Onyek and Courtney, who want to know that how can we develop comprehension skills of children who have language difficulties or language barriers?
Yes, if language difficulties, this is where sometimes we may have to use the help of a speech therapist, to work on vocabulary or language structure and so on. Basically, the basic idea is, you start from words, and then you move on to phrases and sentences, and then, passages, stories, and so on. That is the link. And you have to start working on those kind of skills. Depending upon the cognitive abilities of the children, first you start with objects that are, that they use in their everyday life. And then you move on to things that are in the environment. When they come to school, for example, in the kindergarten children, when they come to school, we work on the things that they use in school. The different kinds of learning materials they use, the different kinds of furniture, different kinds of places that are in the schools. For example, the playground or a computer lab and so on. So you basically start right there. You start that basic, and then you move on as the children move on. Again, depending upon how much the child can take. There are also children who may be non-verbal. And this is where there's quite a bit of challenge, especially some children on the spectrum, for example, or children who have, severe kind of CP and who are not able to articulate orally. But again, this is where a lot of the audio-visual medium has to be used. Some of them will also be using some kind of communicative mode. They might be communicating either through gestures or through pointing. Some of them may be communicating using picture boards like PECs, or there's even a tab which is very popular in India called Avaz, which a lot of children who have communication barriers do use to communicate. So use that. If they are not able to verbalize, use whatever communicative mode they have to demonstrate comprehension. So again, for example, if the child cannot read out or tell you the answer, you can provide the flashcards or the sentence strips with the answers, or you can give multiple choice, and the child can, circle or point to the correct answer or pick out the correct answer. So many of these things can be done. You have to work on what is the child's main communicative mode, and through that, work on their comprehension skills. And if the child has severe language barriers or are non-verbal and are using alternative modes of communication, then you need to, be in close touch with the parents or the speech therapist, the speech and language therapist who's working with the child, and, find out how does the child really communicate their needs. And based on that, use that modality to work on their comprehension skills as well.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a very elaborative insight. It's very important to identify the communication mode of the child. Now we have a question from Ebdomi Ann and Krisa. They are stating that there are some phrases and expressions that might have multiple meanings and need to be inferred to understand the true meaning. And this can be difficult for children with special needs to remember these multiple meanings. What can a teacher do to help children with special needs develop this inferential comprehension skills in children?
Yes, homonyms, that's what they're called, words with similar meanings. We actually work on those skills. Many of these skills are taught targetedly. And they can be taught from very young classes itself. For example, you can start off with simple words like big. What are the different other vocabulary words that relate to the same meaning as big? So you give, words like large, huge, and so on. And you get children to substitute. You can give a sentence, give other substitute words, and ask them to substitute the word, other vocabulary words, which means the same as big. So do these kind of targeted exercises. It's then that their things develop. You can also have anchor charts, where, the central word is big, and you can have all the different words that mean the same as big. And again, depending on the grade level, if they are in much higher classes, you can have words like gigantic or, enormous and so on. Whereas if it's a more slightly smaller classes, you can have words like large, huge, and so on. So you can have anchor charts which provide these kind of things, which they can go. If they're slightly older kids, they can also use a thesaurus. And again, finding out, working on these kind of words targetedly, especially the more commonly used ones, is important. Another way of doing it is also finding out context clues. You may not be able to look up every word that is in the passage. The most difficult ones, yes, you can underline, look it up in the dictionary, find the meaning, and so on. But if there are certain things, I ask the children to read the sentence and if the child has not understood a particular word, I would ask them to underline it, reread the sentence, and try and connect it. What could the possible meaning be? Try and connect it with the previous sentence, for example. So for example, if you said Sam is a fat cat, and just a very basic example I'm giving. Next sentence says he is so huge that he cannot run fast. So the word huge, the child doesn't know. So underline that word and ask them to connect it with the previous sentence. Sam is a fat cat. He is so huge, he cannot run. So he is so something that he cannot run. So what is that something? So then tell the clue lies in the previous sentence. Connect that to the next sentence. So the word huge is, somewhat relative to fat, right? So this is how you do it. It is again, all the skills that we talked about when you teach comprehension, getting them to connect these kind of things helps. So this is called, finding out the context and trying to figure out, kind of trying to make a calculated guess on what the meaning might be. And then you can, of course, check the dictionary and reaffirm whether the meaning you guessed was right or not.
The exposure to vocabulary is important. Ma'am explained it with a lovely example. Now we have a question from Neo, who wants to know that would listening to others rather than story reading be more effective to improve the comprehension skills of a child?
It depends on what modality the child is good at. Some of them are very good auditory learners. So if they love listening to stories, if that is what catches them, maybe listening to the text being read. And nowadays we have technological advancements for this, text to speech is there. So if you just scan the text to the TTS, it will read for you. So you can listen and understand. Whereas for some other children, it is, if they read, then they understand better. So that can be done. So it depends on what the child is more tuned into, what actually helps the child better. And sometimes using both. In fact, most of the time using both helps, because one may be the child's stronger way of learning, but the weaker way will also get bolstered, because all the time, the child may not be able to use TTS. So it is important that the child learns also how to read ultimately. So this is why we talked about multi-modality learning. When you use different kinds of modalities, they may learn through their stronger modality, but their weaker modalities also get boosted and it starts improving.
Using multimodalities is the way to go. Thank you, ma'am. Now we have a question from Shikha Savane, who wants to know that children usually in her class get stuck with the why and how question. How is she that she could help children improve the comprehension of why and how questions?
Try and relate it to your everyday life experiences. Think about something that you've done in class, or you've something that you've experienced. Real life experiences are one of the best ways to understand the whys and the hows. So for example, you can take a very simple example, like it is lunchtime, you want to eat food, and then ask, why do you want to eat food? Now this is a very basic need, right? They've all experienced it. So why do you need to eat food? Related to why. And then how are you going to eat food? So how means you're going to explain what you're going to do. You're going to open up your lunchbox, you're going to use your spoon or your fork, or you're going to use your hands to eat, and whatever. So, try to use very simple, basic, real life examples, and then go on to more abstract examples which are in the text. So when you start with this, when you give enough experience, enough question answer session using real life examples, that really helps. And if say the story or the passage you've read, you can actually demo it in a real life experience. For example, if it's about plants, or if it's about making a sandwich, Say that is the passage you're giving. And, give a question, why are you making this sandwich? So the children have to, they've already done the activity, right? So they can come up with answers on why they're making it. And how did you make the sandwich? So again, then they have to explain the procedure. Number one, first, next, then we did this, then we did this, and last we did that. So, the whole procedure of how they went about making the sandwich. Or if it is a field trip that they've undertaken, or if it's a movie they've seen, connect it to some real life experiences and start off with that and then move on to the text matter. So that will really explain the why and the how questions to them. And try to do the why and how with the same activity. So then that helps them to differentiate the why and the how. A lot of training is required for this. That is why I said comprehension is not an easy skill to teach.
Yes, starting small, as rightly put by ma'am, is extremely important, but also applying and relating it to real life examples really helps. Now we have a question from Bangaru Kamakshi, who wants to know, ma'am, that how can we improve the understanding of questions which are actually given during the exams? Is there any strategy that could help improve the understanding of questions during exams?
Well, the thing is, don't wait until the exams. You try and work on all these different ways of how to understand text matter. And when you're giving questioning, when we talked about questioning as a strategy, give different kinds of questioning. Don't give, suppose, again, I'm taking a very simple example that I gave you earlier. Sam is a fat cat. Okay. You can ask a simple question, who is Sam? Or what does Sam look like? Or is Sam a cat or a dog? See, from one simple sentence, you could frame so many different kinds of questions. So imagine if it is a slightly, a bigger passage, there are so many different ways of asking information about that passage or about that sentence. So always, even when you're working on oral comprehension, ask questions in different ways. Don't give set questions and always give the same kind of questions in the assessments and exams and tests. Right from the beginning itself, get children to respond to different kinds of questions. So it doesn't matter what question you're asking, as long as they know the matter, they should be able to tune their answer fine tune their answer according to the question you have asked. So start those kind of exercises while they start with oral itself. And then when you come to writing also, give similar kind of exercises. Don't ever ask the same type of question. Now, I know in many of our schools, especially in the younger classes, there's a tendency, certain set questions are given and the children are almost memorize answers to those set questions and reproduce in the exams. Never do that. Try and give different kinds of questions. So they know that they can't just memorize blindly the question and answers. They have to think about the text, interact with the text, connect the matter in the text to the question that is asked, and then be able to answer. And this has to start right from oral comprehension itself. Even while you're reading the story, each sentence by sentence, as I said, even when you're reading 2-line, 3-line stories, read one sentence, ask different kinds of questions based on it. Get the children to respond to those different kinds of questions. So when you're training them like that, right from the smaller stories itself, by the time they come to the bigger ones, they will learn to think like that. That thought process, the thinking process would have been triggered like that because of the kind of questioning you've been doing and the kind of responses they have been giving. So that is very, very important. And when it comes to especially the board exams or the high school exams, which are a bit more in a different league, normally what we do is, which I know most schools do, we give mock exams or model exams as they're called, where several past year question banks are taken and children are made to answer. So they know kind of what kind of questions to expect and how to respond to those kind of questions. So that gives them a good indication. Only thing with children with special needs, you may have to work a bit more intensively than the regular children with these kind of questions. So what we do is we go in for the more easier ones initially, and then go in for the more difficult
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really nicely put forth. Now we have a question from Armstrong Ogbana, who wants to know, is there any strategy to help the child make deductions and also develop the deduction skills in children?
Use different kinds of situations, use different kinds of life situations. You can, like we talked about earlier, use multimodality learning. You can give you can give mystery stories or mystery passages where they have to look for clues and evidences, or you can actually set up find the treasure kind of game. They can go through the game and then they have to kind of read and do a comprehension exercise based on that. uh, you can also even connect basically inferential or evaluative comprehension is what they're talking about. You can even go on a field trip, watch a movie, read a newspaper article or a magazine, or an article in a magazine, or even a small news item in a newspaper, and then have discussions on that. Come up with different kinds of interpretations, predictions, whether it was right, whether it was wrong, or whether in such a situation something better could have been done to improve the situation, and so on. So you, by these kind of brains, group discussions, by using different kinds of materials like this, you can bring about deductions, which is basically inferential and evaluative comprehension. So you actually choose these kind of targeted materials and work on these kind of uh, uh, skills. And as I said, start right from the basic ones. Even the like I showed you one example about that My Little Hen worksheet, where it was such a small story, very basic story, but even there they've given, do you think would you like to have a pet, or would you not like to have a pet, and why not, or why would you like to have a pet? So these kind of questions, they have to deduce the information. They have to think a bit more than what is being stated in that particular text. So you can always go beyond what is given. Even when you're doing direct comprehension, at least on the oral side of it, you can still work on inferential, and you still need to work on inferential and deductive comprehension. And so that by the time they come to the written part of it, they already know how to think on those lines.
Starting small with simple activities is extremely important. We have a question now, ma'am, from Malini Chavali and a few others. You had spoken about the story map and the KWL charts. They wanted to know at what level can those be introduced, and are there any stages in teaching comprehension to children?
Comprehension starts right from the word go. So there's no, it just depends on, everything you do has a comprehension element to it. So you have to work on that. Story maps, in some schools, I've seen them used right from when you start introducing small stories. So right from there, you can use a story map. I personally, I haven't taught KG, but from grade 1 onwards, I've taught a considerable amount of time in the primary classes. From grade 1 onwards, I have used a story map. And what I used to do was, like, in fact, one of the pictures I showed was from one of the class, the similar ones that I had used in my classroom, where the plot of the story is given in pictorial form. So for every lesson that you're teaching, I put up a story map, and then after a while, what happens is just the main titles of the story map are given, just the plain template is then given, and I ask the kids to orally tell me, and then I write it down or I put it up. And then by the time when it is done with every story you're doing in grade 1, by the time they come to grade 2, also their reading skills would have developed considerably. So then the plot of the story would not just be in pictorial form. They may be with pictures and words, or they may be in very simple sentences and so on. So you can start right from grade 1 onwards, because you're introducing them into thinking about the different components of a story when you use a story map. So by the time they come to, say, grade 2, grade 3, and the upper primary levels itself, the moment they see a story, they are thinking of, okay, what is the title? What's the author? what kind of story is this? Is there a problem? Is there a solution? Or what are the events that happened first, and then in the beginning, in the middle, in the end? You're training them to think in that fashion. So you can introduce it right from grade 1. And if you're in some schools, they do introduce small stories even in the later part of upper KG. So if you do that, you can start story map right from there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There's a question from Maria Luz Rodriguez Onik Luque, who wanted to understand that there are a lot of skills that we have spoken to about. Can these comprehension skills be used with teenagers and adults as well? If so, can these strategies be used same way, or there's any modification that needs to be made if they have to be improving the skills of teenagers or adults?
Basically, the strategies are the same. What really differs is, what is their level of reading or their vocabulary level and so on. So accordingly, you may have to, use different kinds of, especially if you're using worksheets or, those kind of materials, you may have to, and also the topics, if you're using it with teenagers and adults, you may have to use a little bit of topics that relate to their age. So that is what you have to be bear in mind. Otherwise, strategies and things are pretty much the same. The SQ4R strategy that I talked about, that is all to do with higher level reading and comprehension. So whatever they are reading, they can use those topics. And basically, it is being able to think about a certain printed text in a certain manner, so that you get maximum knowledge from it, maximum information. You gain the information, you're able to think about it and connect it to things you already know. And then you're able to form your own opinions, or you're able to respond to questions, or you're able to apply it. This is the crux of what comprehension is. So, all these skills are required even in teenage and adulthood. It is to what level, what is the complexity of the text, the complexity of the vocabulary, the complexity of the topics that they are learning. That is what is important. So that has to relate to, what their levels are, what their grade levels are, what their age levels are. And if you notice, even in the sample worksheets, we had shown, how for very simple ones you can do, how for slightly complicated ones, or, it's just the difficulty level increases, but basically the skills are pretty much the same, unless there are certain specific skills mentioned. Sometimes lessons have certain specific comprehension skills mentioned, but by and large, they all fall into one of these categories.
Identifying the level is essential, and based on those things, the strategies could be modified. We have a question now by Jenny Regador, who states that given today's scenario of virtual learning, the retention of learning becomes a huge challenge for students. Can you share certain strategies that can be adapted in the virtual setting to teach comprehension skills to students?
Basically, a lot of what I said, it's the same thing. Give these kind of targeted activities. You can nowadays, you have online graphic organizers that are available. They can actually type online, like you can have a Venn diagram where they can actually type online. So live worksheets can be used online, or you can give these kind of tasks to them. You can give these kind of empty, templates, empty graphic organizers to them, and ask them to read a particular passage or do a particular activity, and then fill in those graphic organizers. So that can be done, so even when you're doing it virtually, this is something, all these comprehension strategies that I talked about, they're not just comprehension strategies, they're also retaining strategies, because whatever they've read or whatever they've done, that is being put into a more condensed form, in the form of certain points, or in, noting the certain details, or the topic idea, the topic's main idea with supporting details and so on. So whatever it is that you're teaching, all these also help in retention. So if you're teaching comprehension, it goes without saying that it is a way of retaining that material as well. And it is giving different kinds of practice that is necessary.
Practice is extremely important to retain any kind of information. We'll take the last question for today, ma'am. This question is from I4 Tarva and wants to know that how can we develop the comprehension skills in children who actually like or dislike and hate reading? These children struggle with reading and do not like to read. How can we develop the comprehension skills in these children?
Well, I already mentioned this because if they have a reading struggle, naturally they'll have a block to anything that is related to print. And this is why we have to look for other kind of accommodations. So, you can either read to the child if the material is small enough, or they can have an audio text. So you can provide these kind of accommodations and modifications, or they can view the story in an animated format, if audio-visual format, if that is available. And put the text through text to speech, whereas once you scan the text is being read by the computer. So when the reading struggle is removed to a great extent, then these children would get interested. And also try and use passages or reading materials which relate to the interest of the child. That is also one thing for getting the child motivated. For example, if the child is interested in football, start with give passages which relate to football or their favorite football player and so on. So that will also help with a certain kind of interest. Or if they're very kinesthetic learners, ask them to do a particular activity, do a project on that, or make an art and craft activity, or do a diagram, or draw a picture, and then get on to the comprehension part. So trying and connecting that helps, and then trying to take out the reading struggle as much as possible. That also helps. And sometimes alternated reading also helps. I've done that. If I'm actually sitting with the child, I read one paragraph and then the child reads the next paragraph. And then I read the third paragraph. So the child gets a bit of rest. There was something called reading fatigue that happens in children who struggle with reading, because they use a lot of, it's very effortful reading that they do. So when they use a lot of effort, they get exhausted also very quickly. So to avoid that reading fatigue, it's very important, because if they get fatigued, then comprehension wouldn't happen, because comprehension is such a cognitive process. So try to take the reading struggle out through some means, either through audio text or through, getting them into watching animated text to speech, or you reading out to them and so on.
Using the child's interest as their strength becomes the way to go. Thank you so much, Geetha ma'am, for patiently answering all their queries and making the session a very engaging and informative one. Dear participants, the feedback link will now be posted in the chat box, and I would also like to inform you all that you will be receiving your certificate via email. Also, you can get it from the Ability website and also have access to your certificate. Now, Geetha ma'am, any words from you to our participants?
I think it was it's a very, very exhaustive topic. To talk about it is easy, to implement it consistently is very, very important. And I'm reiterating that, more than any other workshop, perhaps this particular one is what everybody needs to really think and work on, because comprehension is one of the most key skills to, it's almost like a window to your world today, especially in this age, information boom, media boom, and all that. Comprehension is a very, very important skill to teach. So, and I'm glad that the participants, through their suggestions, really gave me a good insight about how much they already know. So it's a testimony that they're already trying some of these things. Only thing, keep up the efforts. If you've learned something new, definitely make use of it. Consistent practice is very important, especially for children with special needs. So with all this, I'm sure the participants would, do a much better job when they go back to the community. And thank you, Ability, again, for giving me such a platform to interact with such a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you, dear attendees, for patiently listening through the session. Now, I would like to take you all through the upcoming events. On the 10th of February, we have Understanding ADHD in Classrooms, at Home and Other Social Settings by Ms. Shivani Vadva. Then on 17th of February, we have Prerequisites to Improve Handwriting Skills for Children with Special Needs by Dr. Neeta Mehta. They'll be at 4:30 p.m. India time, 6 p.m. Indonesia time, 7 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Do check out the links in the chat box and book your slots. Do share it with anyone who can benefit from it. Share the care. And now, until we see you again, it's a big bye from Team Ability. Take care and stay safe.